Today, we're going to be covering a couple of topics that I've been mentioning many times. We've covered it a few times, but we never really went into depth. We never did a systematic review. And that is, well, the first one is some comments about omega 3s. An appetizer today on omega 3s, just a quick single slide comment on it. And then for the main course, we're going to be talking about intermittent fasting. You know, I've mentioned several times the New England Journal put out a really good article. I believe it was the day after Christmas in 2019. We're going to cover that article today. You know, here's one of the questions, for example. Okay, who on this channel or who watching has not heard of intermittent fasting? Everybody's heard of it. But what about the impact of intermittent fasting on FOXO, AMPK? What the heck is FOXO or AMPK? What are these biomarkers and what are we talking about? Most people think intermittent fasting may just be a way of decreasing calories. And in fact, when you look back at a lot of the old caloric restriction studies, especially the ones done with lab models, it turns out they were really more IF or intermittent fasting studies than they were caloric restriction. Now, why is that? We should cover that today in the topic about intermittent fasting. So let's go through some of the other content and how to access the channel, the content on the channel, and then we'll get to those topics for today. Previous topics: injuries, discipline, and especially sleep. We had an interview with a patient, Dana Stewart. Dana's doing a lot of work in terms of providing this kind of information to the teachers of the United States. And she told her story last week. We covered an article, a clinical trial on low-fat diet versus other diets for weight loss. Now, one of the things to remember is it's not always what you think. And you had some of that with this article as well. It's sort of like, maybe you can lose weight, but what about the other things, the biomarkers and some of those things that we get with fasting? That was not so much the topic of that study, but it was a good study and it surprised a lot of people. Take a look. Now, if you've heard it once, I don't know, maybe you've only heard it once. To me, I think I've heard it 1,000 times, especially since 2018. When the American Heart Association said, look, if you've got a 0 calcium score, you don't need to take a statin. And guys like me and David Wright, other docs that look at CIMT have often wondered, well, what about soft plaque? You know, soft plaque does not show up on a calcium score. So what if you how often do you have a 0 calcium score and it's because you had soft plaque and still had significant risk for heart attack and stroke? Well, believe it or not, that study has been done and we covered it a couple of weeks ago. So that's the sort of content you can get. Basically, what we do is we help people understand the things that really are likely to cause death and disability. Heart attack, number 1 cause of death. Stroke, number 1 cause of disability. Dementia, rapidly overtaking stroke as a cause of disability. Number 1 cause of kidney failure. Number 1 cause of blindness. All of these things come down to a common root cause. Diabetes, prediabetes, technically, medically known as insulin resistance. In other words, what's happening is it seems like the first thing to go is our insulin receptors, mostly in our muscle tissue. And as those begin to wear out, get resistant, muscles begin to get smaller. Cardiovascular inflammation starts cranking up. The lining of our arteries starts downgrading, starts losing function. We start spilling protein in our urine, headed towards kidney failure problems. We start getting drusen in our eyes, headed towards some of the blindness issues. But far more of us get a heart attack or a stroke before the other parts get us. You see, these problems are only problems for the tissues that have arteries. In other words, everything. Arteries are our source of life, and arterial health is the critical piece. So we really need to be able to understand how to study and how to evaluate plaque. As we just brought up in that last topic, people think, well, calcium score. You listen to Ivor Cummins' channel and you listen to some other places, and they say calcium score is the thing. CIMT is garbage in, garbage out, so we ignore CIMT. That's one area where I would disagree completely. Calcium score does not show soft plaque. It's a good study. I would clearly recommend calcium score before the standards, stress test, angiogram. So, plaque evaluation is a big deal. And for the most part, in medicine, we're doing that wrong. So we've got a course which helps you understand very quickly how to get the right kind of plaque evaluation. You see, what's happened is the vast majority of docs, 2/3 of the primary care doctors here in the United States, don't know how to diagnose prediabetes, let alone manage it. And that prediabetes, insulin resistance, as we mentioned, is driving the big killers, the big disablers. So you have to learn a little bit about these things for yourself. I didn't make that information up, that statistic about 2/3 of docs not knowing how to do it. It's in the science. Some of my old buddies at Hopkins started that, and now Mayo Clinic, Harvard, other places are all showing the same thing. Doctors do not understand how to diagnose this. Even the CDC is making it really clear. About 90% of us that have this problem don't even know it. So you got to learn some stuff on your own. That's what this channel's about. We're setting this up where our courses, which we used to charge for, we're making all of those free now. We've got one that's free. We're going to set up the other 3 to be free as well, just so you can learn what you need to learn how to, in terms of having a healthy life. And if you have questions about how to access these courses for free, start sending in some comments. That'll help. Our team will begin to understand how to organize around it, and we'll start getting information out about how you can do that. So the subscription plans, we announced that a while back. That has been very, very popular. Speaking of popularity, again, we feel sort of like the dog that caught the bus. We said, we think there's a need for our kind of medicine, fee for value instead of fee for service, whipping people in, patting them on the back, giving them prescription in 10 minutes and getting them out the door so you can run to the next patient. That's what you see mostly in most areas of the United States, and especially in Lower Alabama. We said, what if we set up some clinics or a clinic where we spent time, we talked to the patient, we began to understand what's going on with the patient, and we took half an hour, 45 minutes to begin to understand what's going on with that patient. Well, originally we were thinking about doing a half-time clinic down there. Then it turned into a full-time. Then it turned into 2, then 3. Now we're up to 6 clinics. So again, we feel like the dog that caught the bus. A lot of good docs doing some good work down there. And just be aware of it. We're starting to get people coming in from other states like Texas and Florida who have access to to this network and enjoying what we do and profiting from what we do in terms of getting to a better health. The book, I used to badmouth the book, and then people said, look, Doc, it's a good book. It was far more popular than I expected it to be. And that book tells you a lot of the details about how you should actually evaluate plaque, evaluate your risk. Because bottom line, hey, Doc, my brother had a heart attack. Can we just do a stress test? Oh, that is the wrong thing to do. And this book goes into sometimes excruciating detail on the science on why that is the wrong thing to do. Now, as I said, the appetizer today is going to be omega-3 oils. There was a recent study about novel krill oils and their impact on triglycerides. Now, that was in JAMA, the Journal of the AMA, one of the top journals of the world for medical science. It was in January of this year. And here's what they did. They did a post hoc pooled analysis of the Trilogy 1 and 2 trials. The Trilogy trials originally, 1 and 2, were set up for different purposes. But as often happens, once you set up a large clinical trial, a large study, people can go back in. Usually the researchers that were involved in building that database can go back into that database and look at other things that might be related. So this is what the authors did here. They determined the efficacy and safety of 4 grams per day of an omega-3 formula derived from krill oil as treatment for severe hypertriglyceridemia. They pulled data from triglycerides, those of you who don't remember, the standard target for triglycerides is supposed to be 150 or less. My patients, again, I tend to push harder, so I want it to be 100 or less. I had a patient just yesterday who was up to 100, and he was frustrated that he was that high. I was too, and we had a lot of discussion about mostly carbs in the diet. That's a major driver. But again, there's new information coming out which says, look, triglycerides often respond to omega-3s. So like this one, they pulled the data from 2 randomized clinical trials, including 520 patients. The blood triglyceride levels were reduced 26% at 12 weeks. In fact, let me make a quick note for that patient. I want to make sure that that patient's aware of this. Blood triglycerides were reduced 26% at 12 weeks and 33%, a little over 1/3 at 26 weeks versus 15% and 21% from placebo at 12 and 26 weeks, respectively. So it was found to effectively decrease triglycerides with a safe and well-tolerated area. Now, one thing I want to can't help but mention is Vascepa, icosapent ethyl. We've reported on that many times. The maker of Vascepa, icosapent ethyl, actually approached me and had a couple of their scientists call me. I invited them to be on the channel, and then they sort of got nervous and went sideways on me. But here was what the Amarin people said. Again, the makers of Vascepa. They said, we want to weigh in on this thing about mineral oils. There was some argument about that. But most of all, we want to make the comment that we think it's because as icosapent ethyl is an isolated EPA. The Amarin folks and the Amarin experts have a theory that DHA, which is the other common omega-3, actually interferes with the positive impact of EPA. So I'm not going to go any further on that topic. They made a good case for it, but it's at this point still not proven. So if you have other questions about this, you can raise those in the Q&A. But before we do that, We go from the appetizer to the main meal, or lack thereof, intermittent fasting, when we get the water ball. So, okay, I get it. I've already overworked that analogy to meals and main meals and appetizers. Let's just get to. Let me keep to the script here. Novel, excuse me. Effects of intermittent fasting on aging and cardiovascular disease. As I said, this was a New England Journal article, 2019. Again, unless I'm mistaken, it was the day after Christmas. I remember seeing it, and I've referred to it so many times. And we were talking with the content group about, you know what? I keep referring to that. Maybe we ought to go back and actually cover the article. This was a Science Review article. Dan Longo was the editor. Rafael Cabo and Mark Matson were the authors of this specific article. Studies in animals and humans have shown that many of the health benefits of intermittent fasting are not simply the result of reduced free radical production, the result of weight loss, but an adaptive cellular response, improving glucose regulation, stress resistance, and suppressing inflammation in the cell. So then it went into some good detail on the cellular mechanism of IF, intermittent fasting. Total energy intake, diet composition, and length of fasting contribute to oscillations on levels of bioenergetic sensors. I often call them markers, but these are specific energy related. And this is the currency of energy within the cell. NAD, nicotinamide, adenosine, no, I'm not even going to go there. ATP, adenosine triphosphate, acetyl-CoA. These are the currencies of the Krebs cycle, the glycolysis cycle, the equations, the metabolic processes that create energy for the cell, the energy we live off of. So regulation of cell function, stress resistance, transcription of forkhead box O's. Had you ever heard of that? You may have heard of FOXOs. Anyhow, AMPK. Sirtuins. You ever heard of sirtuins? You remember, what? Now I'm having a senior moment. I'm blanking on his name. Somebody help me out. He wrote the book Lifespan, David Sinclair. He was very much involved in sirtuins. He's also been very much involved in these other biomarkers and focus on energy because, again, as he says, and many of the rest of us say, the most popular theory, the most popular examination of the mechanism of aging has to do with the energy production system. It's those mitochondria, those, I'm 65. I'll actually go on Medicare this month. So I've got a bunch of 65-year-old, well, not really, but I've got 65-year-old cells that have 65-year-old furnaces in them. And if you've ever seen a 65-year-old furnace, yeah, it can still burn. It can still create energy. It still oxidizes stuff like wood or coal or wood chips or oil or whatever it's burning. In these cases, not so much carbs anymore, but carbon input from a low-carb diet, mostly fats and proteins. So my little furnaces inside my cells are burning those. And just like a 65-year-old furnace, you start getting holes in the casing and you get little burning embers coming out, leaving smoke, injuring other organelles in the cell. Again, maybe I'm overworking an analogy here. Let me get back to the script. This causes low levels of amino acid, glucose, and insulin. It represses activity of mTOR. It results in inhibition of protein production and stimulation of autophagy. What does? Again, intermittent fasting. So aren't those important activities building cell materials, yes, those are important. Um, we do want to have levels of amino acids, glucose, insulin to build, but think about it and maybe read a little bit more of Walter Longo's work. He's talking about it, and you look at his diets. He has low levels of amino acids in the diet, low levels of glucose. Part of the goal that we want to have is we want to put that cell, the growth mechanisms of the cell, to sleep. There's another fellow, and I covered him. He won a couple of awards. He works at MIT, and he discovered some of the mechanisms for autophagy. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about shutting down the growth mechanisms of the cell and having the cell start recycling those old beat up furnaces, those old beat up mitochondria that I talked about, and other organelles too. And, damaged parts of the endoplasmic reticulum, damaged parts of other cell components. You want that cell to start saying, hey, I'm hungry, or I need fuel. I'm going to have to start going back to the junk pile and burning up junk to clean things out, to survive, number one, as a cell, to get energy. And number two, what happens is that starts to clean things up. Number three, we get some genetic stimulus to start using the actual proteins that help us accomplish that. So it represses activity of mTOR, the mammalian target of rapamycin, which is a key component. And again, I'm blanking on his name again. I keep getting a picture of the name of the guy that discovered mTOR and rapamycin. Somebody help me on that. We'll get to it, I hope. Anyhow, these things, this intermittent fasting actually starts impacting that. So you get up, and for most people, on a practical application, for most people, when they say they're intermittent fasting, they're usually skipping breakfast. As Walter Longo has pointed out, it's actually healthier to skip dinner. But there are social components. We're social beings, and most of us do better skipping breakfast, that we can just fit it into our lifestyle better. Anyway, if you expand that non-eating window, there's another way of looking at it. It's called TRE, time-restricted eating. If you decrease the restrictions, decrease the amount of time, the window that you're eating. And the most popular way is to, like I said, skip breakfast, go to eating a lunch and dinner between noon and 4 or 5 p.m. That decreases your eating window down to about 4 or 5, maybe 6 hours. When you look at it compared to the old standard American diet, eating some snacks, maybe in the morning, eating breakfast early, like 7 o'clock, then lunch and dinner, you get 3 big boluses of food, and then you get snacks in between, and then a snack at night, 9 or 10 o'clock. And you're getting 6 or 8 meals, 6 boluses of insulin reaction, and your eating window out of 24 hours, instead of being 4 to 6, it turns into 18, even 20. So totally different perspectives in terms of our impact on our bodies. Now, metabolic adaptations to intermittent fasting. So that's what we're looking for. You keep doing this on a daily basis, keeping that lower, that increased time restriction, a smaller eating window. Energy restriction for just 10 to 14 hours results in depletion of liver glycogen stores. Not complete depletion. You're not going to go immediately ketotic there, but you do get significant restriction. And obviously, as many of you know, many of you involved with extended fasting, sometimes it takes a couple of days to get all of that glucose in the liver, or glycogen in the liver, depleted. But again, what we're talking about is a daily small dose of fasting, intermittent fasting. Energy restriction for 10 to 14 hours results in depletion of liver glycogen stores and transformation of triglycerides to free fatty acids within fat cells. I'm going to digress another minute here too, and just raise a question and maybe predict a question, not so much answer it. Those of you who get interested and focused on the triglyceride over HDL ratio know that one of the problems, the immediate early problem causing a decrease in HDL, is you're losing large fluffy HDLs when you've got too much insulin going on. And that has to do with replacing cholesterol with free fatty acids in the those large fluffy particles. You then lose those large fluffy particles. If I've just lost 2/3 of you, don't worry. I'll go back to the script in a second. I'm just going down a quick bunny hole on triglyceride over HDL. So anyhow, the point would be, you would think that free fatty acids might be a challenge in terms of healthy metabolism. No, it's not. And I think the issue that we're going to find out is it depends on where the free fatty acid is. If the free fatty acid is in the large fluffy HDL particles, that's a problem. If we're burning them over within the fat cells, that's not only not a problem, it's a good thing. So again, now that I've confused so many of us, with my digression, let me get back to the script. Energy restriction for 10 to 14 hours a day results in depletion of liver glycogen stores and transformation of triglycerides in the fat cells to free fatty acids. In other words, you're breaking down the fat that's stored in your fat cell. Free fatty acids released in circulation produce ketone bodies in the liver, which are then used for energy production. Energy restriction stimulates mitochondrial biogenesis, in other words, making new mitochondria, and uncoupling. So, mechanisms of improved organ function. So we're going to go a little bit deeper again in terms of the science of intermittent fasting. Cells and organs adapt to change from glucose metabolism to free fatty acids and ketones. What's the most popular term you hear on the internet? Fat adapted. You hear that all the time. People are saying, oh yeah, I'm trying to get fat adapted. What you're doing is you're stimulating a transition from glucose metabolism to free fatty acid and ketone metabolism. And yes, your body uses different proteins to accomplish those different types of metabolism. You know, for example, a car needs a different kind of engine to burn diesel fuel than it needs to burn gasoline, or that it needs to burn leaded versus unleaded, or it's a totally different mechanism if it's burning energy. I mean, electricity in a battery. So just like cars, we need to retool our engine in order to change our diet from glucose or carbs to free fatty acids and ketones, which is a low carb type of diet. So during energy restriction, cells adopt a stress resistance mode. It's that hermeneutics that we've talked about a few times. Is that the right word? Maybe not. And if it's not, somebody help me out there. Stress resistance. During energy restriction, we get cells adopting a stress resistance mode through reduction in insulin signaling and overall protein production. So you get decreased protein production, decreased insulin signaling. In other words, as we've said several times so far, you get a decrease in that growth component. I'm going to digress just a quick second. One of the things that you want to look for decreasing, key bioindicator, is IGF, insulin-like growth factor. That's what IGF stands for. And when you're getting intermittent fasting and you're improving that, getting fat adapted, you are getting regular decreases in insulin signaling And one of those insulin type signals is IGF, insulin-like growth factor. So on recovery from fasting, eating and sleeping, glucose levels increase, ketone levels plummet, cells increase protein production, and they begin the growth and repair. Intermittent fasting and exercise result in improved mental and physical performance. So if you thought I was going to go through all of these details over here and you were looking, dreading it, not going to do it. Now, here's where the article is interesting. They got a little bit editorial here. What they started talking about was, well, if this is true in terms of science, why don't doctors know about it? Well, I mean, number one item, intermittent fasting is not usually taught in medical school. So the training programs for the quote experts that are supposed to understand this just don't have it in there yet. That, one of the major components of this article is a plea to go ahead and start changing physician training programs. It has positive effects on obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, all the things that we study on this channel, or we talk about. IF, intermittent fasting prescriptions. It's a lifestyle prescription for early intervention, are useful particularly for those with overeating and sedentary lifestyles. A patient can be evaluated by experts in nutrition, expert in exercise and psychology, plus frequent contact with medical staff during a minimum of 4-month period, monitoring body weight, glucose, and ketone levels. So that fourth bullet is, again, a plea. The first bullet is saying, we got to get it in basic science for our doctors. That fourth bullet is getting to, okay, here's what our doctors on a day-to-day working basis need to be thinking about in terms of actually taking this to our patients. And as you see under here, they go into a little bit more detail on, some potential prescriptions for intermittent fasting. You got a 5-2 intermittent fasting. You've got time restricted eating, other lifestyle changes, things like that. So thank you so much for your interest. We've got a lot of people today. And as I've said, I've mentioned this study so many times, I needed to actually cover it. Gilbert, if you will give us the transition, we'll go over to Q&A. So I need to change a couple of things on the screen here. Okay, good. We've got somebody actually started off with a super chat. Tired looking for name. Thank you so much, Tired. IF. That's how you do a super chat, by the way, if you're interested. So, I mean, as you see, we've got content that saves lives. I support the vast majority of the costs associated with the channels with seeing patients or our own life savings. So it's nice to get somebody else jump in there and help us out a little bit. Thank you so much, Tired. And here's one of the bigger areas for costs. We've actually got another physician continuing to look at content and helping me on a regular basis with that. We've got, as you know, Gilbert's always there helping us with co-hosting. Gilbert's also great at graphics, Aspen video editing, getting that interesting B-roll background in there. And Michelle's running the whole thing. Then Sam's in there working on how to get this out there and available to people. And the bottom, I've gotten 2 comments again just over the past 24 hours, both of them from patients where they said, boy, I have to tell you, the channel is so much better. And they both said the same thing. They said, yeah, it was good back in the old shaky paper days, but the content was good. It was hard to watch. And, it's still kind of hard to watch and listen to. I don't have the best verbal skills. But again, you've got guys like Gilbert who are out there helping, making it much more professional in terms of the presentation. So thank you so much, Tired, for helping us out. John Tocho, good morning, John. Good morning, Bart, I think from New Jersey. Robert Weiss from the North Georgia Mountains in the U.S., the other Georgia. We've got Terry Dixon. Wayne H. Sunny, Minnesota. For those of you outside the U.S., in the U.S., we like to make fun of each other's, or poke a little fun at each other's accents. Minnesota is fairly cold compared to the rest of the continental U.S., the big 48 states, or the 48 states, not Hawaii and Alaska. And Minnesota was populated by folks from Scandinavia originally. And so there's a little bit of a Scandinavian twang from a lot of folks that live there. Margaret D. Speaking of North, Winnipeg, Canada. Thank you so much, Margaret, for speaking up. Gator, good morning. Also in Georgia, but the metro area. Okay, instead of the mountains, unfortunately. I would agree. I'm from South Carolina. I've spent more time. I've got family that's lived in Georgia. Spent more time than I want trying to drive through Atlanta. Atlanta is one of those places where you want to be away from. Bambi, good morning. Northern California, the Redwood Coast. Oh, for a long time, my favorite area of the country. I'm so jealous. I've spent many, many hours running through Muir Woods and running the Dipsy Trail. At some point, maybe we should talk about the Dipsy Trail. GLR, good morning from sunny Florida. Got a lot of folks from Florida. Thank you so much. Jonathan Hull from the San Francisco Bay Area. I've done a good bit of work with Google and some of the other folks located at San Francisco. And, there's some areas there, some areas in Oakland, some areas that are kind of challenging, but overall, I still love the San Francisco area. S55B, another good morning from Florida. Terry Baranowski, can you spell those? Yeah, I spell what? Omega-3? Vasipa, VASCEPA, icosapent ethyl, ICOSAPNTYL. I did okay in the spelling bee in the, 6th grade, but not very good. I remember I lost the count in the county spelling bee very, very early because I got the word assassin. And I was trying to be overly polite. I didn't think it would have 2 copies of your backside in the same word. Anyhow, Gator, glad you pointed out how old caloric restriction studies were really IF. Due to a recent paper that claims IF really has no benefit over CICO, I guess calories in, calories out. When it came to weight loss, ignores insulin response angle. Yes, we actually covered that a couple of times, and it actually was part of that low-fat diet thing as well. It just these other studies are just looking at weight loss. They're not looking at the healthy, the biomarkers of health of cell metabolism. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, okay. Thanks, Gator. Warren Crow, watching from an Alabama Starbucks. Where at in Alabama? Because you know what? We're not just in lower Alabama anymore. We're in central and northern Alabama. And we've got some stuff which we'll announce maybe in a few weeks. There's change afoot. We may get into, we think we've been growing fast already, and we have. But we may grow a lot faster over the next year. So, Weisbrot Dove. Good morning from Israel. Good morning, Weisbrot. I've got significant patients and some friends either in Israel right now, from Israel, and some of them are, routinely commuting back and forth. So glad to have you. I think Gilbert put that out. Click here to learn more about our content. Warren Crow, wow, free classes. Thanks. You're very welcome. And, it's free. I could hide behind it and say this is all about being nice. And really it is overall. But there's financial support for doing this as well. At the end of the day, we end up doing better when more people watch, more people get engaged in what we do. That's part of the reason why we've offered so much content for free in the past, because once you begin to start understanding what's going on, you start looking deeper, because there's just not the sources out there to deal with this information and to help. Joseph Bates, after you fixed your type 2 diabetes, I think chronic kidney disease, and lost 200 pounds and achieved a triglyceride to HDL ratio of 0.76. What do you suggest next? I have massive plaquing all the way down to my feet. I think you're talking about calcium score there. I've never seen the initials or acronym CACCT, but it fits with calcium score, coronary artery calcium CT. Maybe that's what that means. 5,000 in 2020, and ICD have implemented last December. So number one, thank you for sharing so much of what you've shared. In fact, I had 2 patients this week. One of the more common reasons for coming to see me as a patient is that somebody gets a positive calcium score and they get a big one, like 1,000 or more. And, I'm like I said before, I'm 65, especially men in my generation don't really cry that much. Won't go into reasons why, but I can't tell you the number of times that men have come to see me. They've said, yeah, I got a calcium score of 1,500. I'm getting my affairs in order, and tears come to their eyes. And they're worried about dying. And I keep saying, calm down. You do what you need to do. We're going to take care of this. You're going to just cut the feet right out from under your cardiovascular risk. And we get them to work. They lose 40 pounds. They go back. They say, I'm going to do what John did and get a big decrease in my calcium. And in fact, what usually happens is they get a big increase. And so things they don't understand that improving your risk, decreasing risk, losing those fat pounds results in calcification of soft plaque. So there's so many things that you brought up. One is, these people that I'm talking about, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, even 4,000, and I think yours may be the highest I've heard of, calcium score of 5,000 points. And you get comfortable with that and you begin to realize, you know what? Yeah, I got plaque, but it's stable. And I'm checking it on a regular basis. I'm making sure I don't have soft inflamed plaque, and I'm good. So it takes a while to make that transition, to get through that, but that's a great place to be. So number one, it's like I do with so many of my newer patients. They come in, I say, gosh, you've got plaque, but I look at your insulin survey and it's not too bad. It doesn't really support that kind of plaque. And they say, well, doc, you need to know I lost 30 pounds. I lost 50 pounds. I lost 150 pounds. So you start making these changes and it starts correcting things. You're doing great. And that's what I end up saying. And then they say, just like you did, Joseph, well, that's good. I expect you to say I'm doing great. And I know I'm doing great. But what can I do next? And I will tell you this, Joseph, I haven't met anybody yet who could not improve where they were, what they were doing, improve their cardiovascular risk. Now, did you give me enough information to tell what you can do next? No, you didn't. You're doing some really good stuff, but I'm sure we can all do better. Talal. Great. Thanks, Doc. Warren Crow. Jubilee. Ang Don. Spot on. Pre-diabetic is the source for everything. Thank you so much, Ang. Warren Crow. I'm going to Gulf Shores to Jubilee while beaching. Oh, neat. Very good. Glad to hear that. Tell them that I sent you. See you at Gulf Shores State Park. I think that's what that is. Monique Robinson. The courses are so informative. Thank you so much, Monique. You know, I did those a couple of years ago. We've updated them. We've done a few things. Chris, when he was working with us, did some really good work to make it the text part much more readable. So again, back to your point. Thank you for sharing this information. The cardiovascular inflammation course has been very, very helpful. Monique, again, it's so nice. It's sort of like the book. I keep bad-mouthing things, but then when somebody who's actually taking a look at it says, no, wait a minute, these things are good, it's very helpful. I appreciate it. Leo Acapulco, good to hear from you again. I was just in Iceland on vacation, and in the breakfast buffet, they have a bottle of Icelandic cod liver oil and beetroot juice. So you can have a shot. It tastes good. Check the carbs on the beetroot juice, and be careful if you're drinking a lot of cod liver oil. It's got a lot of vitamin D, and vitamin D is good. It's one of the top 2 supplements that I recommend. But both of those top 2 supplements, you can get too much. You can get injury and death. With vitamin D, you can, levels way over 100 have resulted in kidney damage. And, one of my patients this week, same thing, had previously had some kidney damage from that, or a problem with it. Now, if you're listening closely, you're saying, okay, Doc, what's the other of the top 2 supplements? The other one is niacin. And yes, niacin can cause some injury too, especially with the liver. So you want to make sure that you, first of all, need these. Almost everybody needs vitamin D3. But again, you have to watch your levels. Bart Robinson, I've been taking a liquid fish oil recently. It has a lemon flavor, but I wonder of the purity and potency and if it's really helping any, but my triglycerides are not high. Well, we used to say, and I think there's still some validity to it. When I review the information from Amarin Consultants and others, EPA is where you probably do want to focus. You want to try to get as close to a gram of EPA as you can, and maybe decrease some of that DHA. So Warren Crow's helping me out. Nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. Thank you, Warren. NAD. Those of you who may remember, I was struggling over the science term a while back. Pavel Korda, thanks for your amazing job. Thank you so much, Pavel. We appreciate that. Warren Crow, invite David Sinclair to a session. It's a good idea. I've been watching Lex Friedman recently, and he's an AI specialist at MIT, and his stuff is really, really good. The quality of his stuff comes from the quality of his visitors. I've just been intimidated, to be very frank, I've been intimidated by asking that level of person to appear on the show, and actually even finding him. It's a good idea. I'm beginning to develop an appreciation and desire to do that. Thank you for calling me out on it, Warren. Lucian P. Most people can only fast for 20 hours. if you can fast for days, like the literature suggests, don't I know it? I've done a good bit of that for years. I've done like a 28 to 40 or 24 to 48, 36-hour fast, even 72-hour fast, but 24 to 48 hours or 36 to 48 hours weekly. I'm not doing that right now. And I'm into more of an IF stage, intermittent fasting stage, but it's hard, when people ask me, what can you do next? There was somebody that asked a few minutes ago, what can I do next? Let me ask you, have you done prolonged fasting? If not, that's something to consider. Get a Freestyle Libre or a Dexcom 6 or 7 or whatever's the most recent. Start watching your blood sugars, the things that make it go up. Eat, sleep, and exercise to the glucometer. And again, don't look at the limits they're talking about. They set those limits for people that that have out of control insulin dependent diabetes. That's too late. By the time you have that level of stuff, it's not completely too late, but by the time you get there, you should have gotten a CGM a long time ago. Actually, one of the things we do is, I'm sorry, I digressed again, and I went down the bunny hole of talking about CGM, continuous glucose monitoring. I provide that for a lot of people. In fact, I have arguments with a lot of groups. The CDC underreports the dangers of insulin resistance, prediabetes, diabetes, and the prevalence of it. The FDA, I've got several arguments with them. Number one, I think they should not require a prescription for metformin. Number two, even more so, I think the FDA should not require a prescription for CGM. It used to be the only CGMs that were out there was the Dexcom. Then Abbott came up with the Freestyle Libre. And now it's just like these things are blossoming where you can get continuous glucose monitoring. What is going on is this. Think about it. If you hear about it in terms of car safety, you go to this, you have to take those safety courses when you're in or you may take those safety courses to decrease your insurance when you're in high school, or your high school students may do that. What's the thing that they say once, twice, over and over and over again? Speed kills. Why am I going down that bunny hole? Just give me a second. So speed kills. That's what they keep saying over and over again. Well, at least you've got a speedometer from the day you first start driving. The major thing that's going to kill you is going to be speeding. We don't have that with health. The thing that kills is these blood sugar spikes, and people that have blood sugars 180, 200, hour after hour, day after day, and they don't know it because they don't have a speedometer in their car. That is what CGM is all about, continuous glucose monitoring. So, you know what? At this point, Lucian, you brought up a really good point about fasting. I'm not sure how I turned that and went down this bunny hole about CGM, but you're right. There's still a lot of things that most of us can do and very few of us have actually done. At the very least, lower insulin and blood sugar spikes is good. Exactly. Thank you so much, Lucian. Warren Crow, IF, affected by cryotherapy. That's a good question. I know on Joe Rogan and some of these other very popular sites, they talk about things like cryotherapy. Let me say this. I mean, you may have picked up on some of my nonverbals, like, that's not well researched. Well, here's the thing. Heat shock proteins and temperature labile proteins, there is science there, and there is valid science in those. So you look at saunas, you look at cryotherapy, there's actually evidence. Rhonda Patrick found My Fitness. She's a great person for covering both of those items. I haven't covered them. I've covered them a little bit, but not a whole lot. But I will tell you, when you start looking at some of these bioindicators, FOXO, AMPK, some of the others, they start looking at those, and there is some significant evidence that both cryotherapy and saunas make a positive difference. That wasn't exactly the question you asked. You said, is it affected by cryotherapy? I've never seen anything that put IF together with cryotherapy. It's an interesting idea. And I would assume that it's sort of like many of the other things biologically. It's like the question is there an additive effect or a multiplicative effect or a subtractive effect? I don't know the answer. I wouldn't at all be surprised if it was a multiplicative effect, but I'm not going to try to guess on that. HMS, thanks for spreading the light. Thank you so much, HMS, for your interest. Rose, I eat last meal at 7 p.m. and eat at 12 or 2. So, Rose, you've got a 5 to 7 hour time restricted eating window. Thank you so much for providing that example and sharing it. Tired looking for name. IF, that's another super chat. Thank you so much, Tired. IF, usually OMOD. For those of you who don't know what OMOD means, that's 1 meal a day. That is a significant level of time restricted eating. OMOD is part of time restricted eating, and time restricted eating is very analogous to intermittent fasting, closing that window of eating. I think 2 meals a day on weekends. As always, thank you very much for great content. You're very welcome, Tired. As always, thank you so much for your attention, your participation, your comments, and super chats. Very, very helpful. Jan Pruitt, I've only heard of hermeneutics and stuff. You know what? As soon as I said that, I thought, no, that's hermeneutics. Here's what the concept I'm trying to think of is where you put a little bit of the offending thing, like heat, and your body starts developing, it stimulates the body. There's a word for this, and I can't think of it. Somebody help me out. It's where you stress the body just a little bit, and the response to that small amount of stress creates growth. It's like going to the gym and pushing yourself hard through exercise. There's a generic term for that, and you're right. It's not hermeneutics. Well, I'm confusing my interests a little bit. Grows got to check the insulin resistance. Miriam Barry, thanks. Love. Thanks for the friendship. I'm sorry I contacted you like that. My name is Suzanne Santos of Austrian origin, and I live in France. I suffer from serious illness that condemns me to certain death, liver and uterus cancer, savings fund of €500,000, and a young 8-year-old dog that I'd like to donate. Someone trustworthy and honest. That's don't know quite how to respond to that, Miriam. And all of a sudden, here we go. Pavel Korda, I'm a health practitioner. I'm spreading all I learned from you. Thank you so much, Pavel. I appreciate that. Rose, what's that mean, Jan? Not sure where that went. Fort Worth West Side, good to hear from you. Yeah, you guys are right. Thank you so much. It's not hermeneutics. Somebody's gonna interpret my silly babbling and figure out the concept, the medical concept I'm trying to come up with. Chuck Rogers, good morning, Doc. 68 fit, intermittent fasting. Any thoughts on daily Viagra usage to stave off Alzheimer's? So I will tell you this, this is not the first time I've heard about it. I haven't heard about it a lot, but it's more than just, okay, well, let's have a fun, exciting life. It's the Viagra getting more vasodilation, and is that helping and decreasing Alzheimer's? That's totally unproven at this point. But I'm guessing there's a lot of people that are really enjoying the experiment. But anyway, Rose, doing this for years. Good report on test, but irregularities. Rose Hart. I'm not connecting. Jose Fontal. Hi, Doc. When I take niacin after a carby meal, I feel little to no effects, but on an empty stomach, I'd be burning in the fires of hell. For those of you who haven't taken niacin, it has a thing called prostaglandin. And the prostaglandin is like a locally acting hormone. And so what will happen when you take niacin, you get what's called a niacin flush. You start getting this burning, and it burns. And what's going on is that prostaglandin has reached that part of your skin. It's opened up the small arteries, and you're getting that burn. It turns red. I remember the first time I tried niacin, I went to a choir practice, and all of a sudden, I mean, this was an hour or two later, all of a sudden, it felt like somebody was scalping me. It felt like they were pulling my hair off and just, so that's a problem. Thank you, Jose. Now, what I recommend one of two different types. I'm not financially associated with either one of them. One of them is Rugby, Rugby. The other one is Enduracin, Enduracin. Both of those are globally available. They're clearly available on Amazon. That's where most of my patients get them. And what they are is they're niacin, but they don't make the mistake of adding lapropiant. Lapropiant was a chemical that was added to niacin in the past to make it stop burning. Well, like often happens, then they started watching it and they started finding that the thing that stopped the burning also stopped the positive impact of niacin. Niacin is the only thing that decreases triglycerides, decreases LDL, increases HDL, and most of all, and my most common use for it is for patients with Lp(a). So thank you for the opportunity to go down that digression, Jose. Hope that helped. Now, as usual, I never really got to your question. Your question is, when the best time to take niacin? There is no good time to take niacin. You can try several different things. One is taking it before you take a shower or take a bath, because that can help decrease that thing. Does it help a whole lot? Not really. Another time is a lot of people take it before they go to sleep at night, and they think they sleep through it. Again, that may help a little bit. Not so much. You can try it. For some people, it does help. Bogey pepper. My memory glitches are more upsetting to me. I watch you just let it roll off your back. Yeah, a good habit for me to adopt. Thanks. Well, here you go, Bogey Pepper. Thank you for acknowledging that, and thank you for the compliment. Yeah, I've got two perspectives. Number one, I do cover a lot of science, a lot of details. So it's like, yeah, at some point I probably am going to start going off that deep end. And then I do get frustrated with it, but it's like, if I got frustrated with it to the point that I couldn't do this, that would be, again, I get a lot of feedback from folks that this content is saving lives. So, you know what? Even if I look ugly and dumb, if I'm able to save a life, I'm going to do it. But here's a bigger thing, and maybe even a little bit more of an issue. I've had a long time to get used to this. I first noticed this when I was in the 4th grade, 10 years old. So my family of origin doesn't have the greatest verbal skills anyway. Anyhow, enough about me. Thank you so much, Bogey Pepper, for the compliment. Margaret D., please hit the like button. Thank you so much, Margaret. We've had 130. We got 115. Only one like button. Dang, you know what? Like buttons don't cost anything. It's not like a super chat. Thanks so much for the reminder, Margaret. Rose Nashville, B. Flint, Kinderhook, New York. Thank you. Hello, Dr. B. Hello, B. Flint. Weisbrot Dove. Good morning from the Holy Land, Israel. I had a blast. My wife knew I had studied a little bit of. I went to the Baptist College at Charleston. Now it's called Charleston Southern University. And if you go there, you have to take some good Bible classes. So I got a really good, well, I've done some other stuff too. I've actually read the Bible, not once, but like 5 or 6 times, 7 times. And it's interesting what you get out of that. And again, I apologize. I digress. We saw so much interesting stuff when we visited the Holy Land. And my wife, who knows me and works with me every day, talks to me every day, was surprised about, all the stuff that's there and some of the stuff I'd heard of. So it's an interest area for me. Thank you so much for mentioning it. Dan Mitzloff, good morning from Sebring, Florida. Thank you for all your kind, helpful guidance. Thank you for the acknowledgement. Brendan Lenane, not sure if it's due to my Northern European Irish ancestry, but I cannot tolerate avocados or olive oil. That is interesting. You're the first person I think that I've ever met who can't tolerate avocados or olive oil. Items every practitioner advocates. Not heard of anyone who does not recommend. Me either. Am I missing out? You're missing out. Yeah, those are the two. I mean, that's the staple. I've demonstrated personally that you can go. They say this may sound like a digression. Just hold on for a second. They say that, well, if you're going keto, it's all animal fat, an animal diet, like carnivore. And if you go no animal or plant-based, it's going to be high carb. Some of that tendency is true, but it's not entirely true. I've demonstrated that you can go low carb, even keto, on not only a plant-based, but a vegan diet. Now, if you do that, though, you're going to have to be very comfortable that you're going to get a ton of your calories from plant oils, the healthy ones being avocado oil or olive oil. And avocado is better for cooking because it's more heat stable. Anyhow, so yeah, that's a big deal. Sorry to hear that, Brendan. Tammy, I'm from South Carolina too. Well, great. And for those of you who don't recognize, that purple and orange paw print is from Clemson, one of the other big universities in South Carolina. The other big one is University of South Carolina, and their animal, I'm blanking on the term, is a chicken, the Fighting Gamecocks. Michael Sanders, good to hear from you, Michael. I'm wondering if IF is appropriate all the time, or for me getting long in the tooth, is 3 meals a day of 30 grams of protein to develop muscle and correct sarcopenia is more appropriate. Well, you bring up a really good point, Michael, and it deals with an issue, some of the balancing or competing priorities that many of us have as we age. One of the things that we have, and you mentioned it, is loss of muscle mass. Well, assuming I'm correct, and I don't have a whole lot of people argue. Well, there are a lot of people that argue that. Anyhow, let's don't get into that. Let's just say insulin resistance is the major cause of death and disability. Well, one of the major underlying safety valves for insulin resistance is metabolically active muscle mass. Well, you want to decrease body fat, but you want to increase muscle mass. Do you just want to completely lose weight? Well, a lot of people get too hung up on losing weight, and I had a patient yesterday who's always been into, I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger with big muscles. And the reality is, especially with men, you can get too hung up on that. You want metabolically active muscles. There's a fellow named Richard the Ant Hawthorne, and someday I'm going to show. Well, actually, I did a video on him and Arnold. And Richard the Ant is called the Ant because he's got several world records for lifting deadlifts, bench press, I think squats, and some other things, multiples of his body weight. He weighs like 135, 145 pounds, but he's lifting like 650 pounds multiple times. And so the point behind that is don't get too caught up in terms of having, a BMI of 25, something like that. I mean, you clearly have a lot of room. And I'm not saying that's what your BMI is, but I tend to see that. People say, when I get below a BMI of 25, everybody starts telling me I look skinny. Well, actually, the way we look, if you're at a healthy weight, you're usually going to get a few people telling you, you look too skinny, you look sick. If you're not hearing people tell you that, you're probably not thin enough. And don't worry about getting thin because, like with Richard the Ant Hawthorne, you don't need to have giant muscles to have strong metabolically active muscles. And that's what we want. Why do we want metabolically active muscles? And what does that got to do with insulin resistance? Active muscles bypass ailing insulin receptors. Let me repeat that. Metabolically active muscles bypass insulin receptors. So think about those as you continue to worry about weight loss, muscle mass, things like that. I'm more concerned about the muscle, the balance of muscle to fat and the metabolic activity of that muscle tissue than I am actual just muscle mass itself. And I need to really start clarifying that. It's a good point. Thank you for bringing it up, Michael. We've got a lot of interest today, a lot of questions. I'm going to try to get through a few more, but I don't think I'm going to get through everything. Bambi, I used to live on the Dipsy. Oh gosh, Bambi, how could you move away from the Dipsy Trail? Those of you who haven't seen the Dipsy Trail, you got to look it up. Barnett Roy, good morning from Safely. Is it South Florida? Would not miss your shows. Well, thank you anyway, Barnett. Not sure where Safi is, but thank you. Is OMAD safe after quadruple bypass surgery? Well, yes. I mean, I struggle. I sit there and part of my bells go off saying, well, don't tell somebody how to, don't give somebody a prescription over the internet. And I don't think this is. It's like OMAD's safe no matter. I mean, there are very few situations where OMAD would not be safe. One of them would be if you're taking insulin, you need to be thinking about drugs that might decrease your blood sugar. So loving your growth. Well, thank you so much, Warren. Leo Acapulco, what about growing more and coming to Orlando? Leo, we had an event in Orlando right before the pandemic. In fact, people were starting to ask about that bug. It was like February, what was that, 2020? I've talked to Janice a few times about doing some more events. She was the one that tended to organize them. Janice and Michelle, and those are a big deal. And part of the problem is we're way too busy with the Alabama project and a couple of other projects that we're working on. Arthur Berry, should I be on a statin with a calcium score of 50? I'm not going to advise you, but I can say a very simple point. I don't recommend statins usually so much for LDL level, like most docs do. I recommend statins if you have plaque. And with a calcium score of 50, yeah, you've got plaque. Barnett Roy, comment on overage and intermittent fasting with a lot of issues. I follow you, lost 75 pounds. Wow. Thank you for following me and losing 75 pounds. That's great. And Thank you personally for that. From 215 down to 145, still high triglycerides, 170, BMI 21. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for the acknowledgement. And thank you for what you're doing. That is not easy. And you've got to change everything in your life to make those kind of lifestyle changes. And when you do what I do for a living and you run into the vast majority of people don't make those changes, you run into somebody that does, it makes a big, big difference. Thank you so much, Barnett. Yeah, and we may want to, you bring up a topic, people that have continued high triglycerides, even though they've got it in the face of low carb diets and even significant weight loss. There are some genetic reasons, just like with most of our other metabolic processes and genetics. Those things interact, and there are clearly some genetic reasons for having high triglycerides. That would, that's when you start thinking about some of the medications that I've mentioned already. Clearly, some of the supplements. Lucian P, does zone 2 endurance training the best kind of exercise to reduce cardiovascular risk? I read the body can do a natural bypass from exercise. Well, it's called collateral circulation, and the body actually does work on developing collaterals, a bypass, a natural bypass. You see it, you hear it all the time. And it's like that concept that nobody's helped me with, where you stress something a little bit, not enough to kill the organism, but to make it improve. That's, stressing the body from exercise, as you just discussed, you just brought up, can help the body grow that bypass. Somebody help me with that term. It's not hermeneutics. I've got stuck on that term now. So, old Roscoe, kind of off topic, but maybe not. Are you having problems getting contrast dye? That would assume that I'm doing either a lot of stress tests with contrast dye, and I don't. It would also, or I'm doing a lot of CT angiograms, and I don't do CT angiograms. I don't run an imaging center. I don't run a cardiovascular testing center. I do order a few CT angiograms, which do have contrast dye. I haven't heard anybody talking about a problem with accessing them. HMS, what's the effect of vitamin K2 on plaque? Long story. I'll try to make it short. I've got several videos on vitamin K2. If you haven't seen them, take a look. One of them's kind of confusing because I go down too many bunny holes. But despite that, it got a lot of interest, and so I kept it up there. There is the statement, the internet urban myth that K2 takes calcium out of the artery wall and puts it back into the bone. I don't think that's exactly the case. I think what's going on is K2 does have an impact on calcium. I think what K2 is doing is actually impacting some enzymes that are effective at helping the osteoclasts and osteoblasts and other cells which do that. Add calcium to bone, take calcium out of bone. But I think it's more of a substrate kind of issue. And those enzymes that help stimulate those cells, some of those enzymes have vitamin K2 as a cofactor. So you do want to make sure that you've got enough vitamin K2. So in looking around at that, I began to look at are there any studies about vitamin K2 and insulin resistance? And I actually found one. I probably lost it and haven't found it again because, again, some of the stuff I'm doing. But it did. It looked at some middle-aged men. It gave them 400 micrograms of K2 a day, and it actually saw some decrease in insulin resistance. I will tell you this, there are other studies going on. I take vitamin K2. I'm a big fan, but it's too early to speak with authority on that issue right now. Bambi, how about planning an in-person event in the fall where we can get a CIMT, some education, meet everybody, maybe a yearly event? That's so interesting, Bambi. We used to do that. pre-COVID, and because of what's the growth in the channel, the growth in the Alabama project, we have thought about it. We actually had a big one with over 150 people planned, signed up in Ohio, mid-March of, I think it was 2020. It was about the time. And see, we had actually planned a cruise in China, and we were going to be in, guess where? Wuhan, about the month before. And it was like, anyway, I have mentioned this a couple of times to Janice. We could actually do those. So let us know where you're from if you'd like one of these. David Mites is getting back out on the road and starting to get some of these CIMT events out there. So we may be able to get something done. Warren loves Lex Friedman. I do too. Blade Runner, what do you recommend for LP(a)? As I said before, the most common thing, we used to think that there was nothing you could do for it, except niacin, high levels of niacin. And then a lot of people said, oh, well, it only decreases LP(a) by about a quarter to a third, which is true. However, I can tell you, if you watch a cardiovascular inflammation panel, you'll see that those 25 to 33% decreases in LP(a) do correlate with decreases, significant decreases in cardiovascular inflammation. Now, a lot of people would say you got a chicken or egg problem where it's the decreased inflammation which is resulting in the decreased LP(a). I'm not going to get into that detail, that theory right now. Because I'll say, if you look, I've got about a dozen videos on niacin going into a lot of genetics and detail, and the great niacin debate is one of the titles. And you've got the Americans saying, look, we looked at niacin with, now I'm blanking on the term, the chemical that decreases the flush. I mentioned it a few minutes ago. They put that chemical in there and it stopped working. So they said niacin doesn't work. Well, talk about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The fellow that did that study said, I'm so afraid that this study is going to be misinterpreted to say that niacin doesn't work. And I actually covered a clip of the study author saying that. It's the HPS2 Thrive and another one. And again, so back to your question, what do I recommend for LP(a)? Number one, manage all of your other cardiovascular risks, because this is very much a multi-factor risk situation. Number two, consider niacin. Number three, they've tried other things like for plasmapheresis. Those just, they work for a week or so, but then they don't really work. If you're not aware of it, there's a new drug class that's come out, and it's really having a huge impact, like 75, 80% decreases in LP(a). And that drug class is called the antisense drugs. Antisense has some implication regarding genetics. And I hate to poison the well for some people if it does that, but the facts are the facts. If you're afraid of some of the newer vaccine formations, they don't get any deeper into genetics than antisense drugs. So antisense is, both of them have to do with having an impact on cellular genetic, quote, genetic mechanisms. Lucian P. Sim Lan is a good person for these topics if you can connect with him. I've heard that name, but I don't think and I know I haven't studied it. Bart Robinson, thanks for addressing my fish oil comment. Lucian, NutriSense offers a CGM, which anyone can get if you're interested. Yes, that's the point. I keep meaning to do a video on that, because now you're getting some CGMs that are available without prescription. For those of you who need a prescription, I feel strongly about providing them. So I provide a lot of those. Lucian P. would think most people over 40 would benefit from having a CGM. Oh, I would too. And let me tell you this, under 40 as well, just to figure out what a good diet is for them. Nutritionists should be able to prescribe it. I agree. And, darn, I tell you what, three more. Matt Brewster, thanks for the information on niacin. I took my LP(a) down from 150 to 77 using 2 grams a day. When it gets blood work up, what are the key items to ask for that aren't normally included? Well, a couple of things. Number one, what we call an inflammation profile. Number two, by far the most important test really is not these things. The most important test is an insulin survey. And you can get those. We help a lot of people get those. Number three, don't get just a cholesterol profile, get a fractionation. And those get you a lot deeper in terms of where you need to be. Now, I did want to say, we got another super chat. This one from Barnett Roy. Thank you so much, Barnett. I appreciate that. Fort Worth West Side. How much do they charge for their CGM Lucian P? It's a good question. Thank you so much for your interest today. I apologize. I'm going to have to run. Bye-bye.